Yeah, hello. I'm welcoming Michael Liebreich here with us today. He's the founder of Bloomberg New Energy Finance and has been doing the forecasts of energy issues for now some 12, 13 years. So one question I would like to ask you, looking again 12, 13 years into the future, we're in 2030. How does the energy world, how does the transport world in 2030 look like?
So first of all, it's great to be here, and you've started with a very difficult question. There's certain things that we know are going to be the case in 2030 in the energy sector. So we know that the cost of renewable energy will have gone down further. We know, therefore, that the uptake will be higher. We know that there will be power storage, that there will be demand response. Smart grid will be, doing a lot more of the heavy lifting. On the transport side, I think we can already say that electric vehicles will have really, started to ramp. So we'll know that they have a lot more, that they're generating electricity demand. And that's a pretty positive picture. I think that the carbon emissions overall will have clearly peaked. They probably already have, and they'll be declining. But then the unknowns are around how fast is that going to be happening? Is it going to be, are we still frankly near peak emissions with a gentle decline? Will the shift to a clean energy system have maybe not stalled, but somewhat stalled because of variability of sun and wind and no real solutions and a loss of political will? That's also a possibility, to be honest.
That is obviously an unclear future, but at the same time, companies will now need to take decisions. So what really is their business model as an energy utility? What is the business model of a car maker today? What would you say?
Well, look, I think I would stick with the first part of my response to that question. In other words, we know certain things. We know there's going to be a transition, a transformation. We don't know the speed. But, if you're a car maker or you're a utility or you're a technology provider in energy, let's put it this way. You don't invest in diesel. You don't invest in old technologies. This transition is happening. We just don't know the speed.
That's something. But maybe looking also at politics and policy. Where do you see the German energy policy should be putting its headweight for the next 2, 3 years, maybe after the election, when making such a future possible?
Well, so I think that we're reaching a time of consequences would be the way I'd put it, because what's happened so far is there's been really promotion of renewable energy, and that has led to penetration of renewables into the electricity market. The costs have come down at an extraordinary rate. Unsubsidized costs of 3-4 euro cents per kilowatt hour, unthinkable low costs in various parts of the world, not everywhere, but very low costs. Unsubsidized offshore wind that we've seen recently in Germany, but that will only get you so far. From a policy point of view, what we now need to see is the focus shifting on whole system transformation, not just adding a bit of renewables, but whole system transformation. That means, what do we do when the sun doesn't shine, when the wind doesn't blow? How do we secure the system? The policymakers really need to do that now, and the best single way of doing it is really going to be, it's going to require a lot of political braveness, because it's actually going, if you're going to do that whilst continuing to address climate, it will mean shutting down the dirty capacity, actually taking, in Germany's case, the coal out of the system, and then allowing the other technologies, space, storage, demand response, gas amongst them, to come in and provide the reliability of the system.
Now, that's daring, but policy should rise to those issues. Let's have a look at maybe other countries. What's going to happen in your country, in the UK, after Brexit? Are you still going to stick to climate issues? Are you still going to move forward on clean energy?
So first of all, the context, before answering that question, the UK is moving away from coal. The UK will be off coal by 2025. We had, a couple of weeks ago, 24 hours with no coal. mean, this is the country that saw the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We haven't had a day with no coal-fired electricity since we've had electricity. So really quite an extraordinary shift. In terms of commitment to climate action, that has survived Brexit and changes in government, very strong commitments to the climate goals, which survive. There are a few voices that say, we should get rid of the Climate Change Act. They are marginal. So there's a strong commitment to climate action. The challenge is, of course, as you move away from coal and you get more renewables, the UK pushing very strongly into offshore wind over the last 5 years and out into the future. The only way to do that is with lots of interconnections. And when I say lots, not 4 gigawatts, which we have now, but 12, 14 gigawatts that are planned. And that has to survive Brexit. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
Okay, so basically, it's about Europe still working together, even at times of Brexit, in terms of energy and climate issues.
Well, that's certainly the case. And actually, what's interesting, if you look at I think it's the two countries that trade most electricity across their borders, would be Norway and Switzerland. So it's clear that being in the EU is not a precondition for being part of the energy markets. And of course, when it comes to natural gas, then the EU or not EU, it's sort of irrelevant. So it's certainly absolutely possible to have a European integration around the energy markets and the electricity markets, irrespective of Brexit. Of course, what Brexit does is it creates these kind of political crosswinds and this statement and that statement and so on, which is very unhelpful if what you're trying to do is make 15, 20, even 40-year investments in interconnections or in energy infrastructure.
Now, one last basically question on the rest of the world. Trump and China and India. Can we somehow be optimistic on the developments that we're going to see in the next years in those countries?
So, first of all, I'm always optimistic because
Me too.
Engineers are smart. Humans innovate. There's plenty of cash in the system. There's plenty of savers or pension funds, investment, insurance companies want to invest, sovereign funds. So there's plenty of money to finance, and there is an underlying momentum to this shift to clean energy and clean transportation, not just because of climate, but also because of air pollution, lots of reasons. So I'm generally optimistic that the momentum will continue. It could be faster. I started by saying, by 2030, we don't know where we'll be because we don't know how fast. But overall, I'm optimistic. The big challenge in Asia is that they still, for all of the stories about cancelling power stations in China and India, there are still plans to build a lot more new coal. If they do that, forget 2 degrees. Just forget it. It's not going to happen. So a lot more work to be done in Asia to leapfrog in some of those economies, so in the case of India and some of the poorer economies, to leapfrog to cleaner solutions, and in China to continue really this dramatic shift away from old inefficient coal and to a much more modern mix. US with Trump, President Trump has inherited a really golden legacy. It has to be said. More wind, more solar, more energy efficiency, a more productive economy, on every front and at very low costs. Americans are actually spending the lowest proportion of their income on energy for any time pretty much in history. So it's really a golden legacy. What you can be sure is that these moves to sort of deregulate coal, gas, oil even more, they're not going to dramatically change the economics. We've already got cheap gas, cheap coal, cheap oil. It's just going to become a little bit cheaper. So for renewables, there's a little bit more of a headwind. But at the state level, corporations, individuals, there's an enormous thirst for the cleaner solutions. So I'm going to remain optimistic. I think it's going to be very difficult. I think essentially, if I summarize, I'm going to say that the clean energy is already over the tipping point, and clean transportation, particularly electric vehicles, is actually probably also over the tipping point, but not everybody's realized yet.
But that's good news. So we're over the tipping point. We now have to speed up. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.